So you want to win battles. Welcome to AstatorTV. In this video, I share war selection, battle tactics, tips and tricks intended for intermediate players that want to optimize the potential of their armies. First, let's make sure you understand range and dispersion. The range is illustrated by the circular yellow highlight on the ground. That border corresponds to the maximum targeting range of 320 in the stats card of this Eastern European cannon example. However, those red impact dots confirm that the projectiles do not always hit exactly on the target. That's because of the spread or dispersion mechanic. The higher is the dispersion, the less accurate is the weapon. This cannon has a dispersion of 15%. This means that when shooting at the maximum targeting range of 320, the projectile will fall within a circle with a radius of 48 around the target. Therefore, the attack ground command can sometimes be used to hit something located further away than the indicated maximum targeting range. On the other hand, at the minimum targeting range of 100, the projectile will hit within a circle with a radius of 15. In that situation, the target will be hit more frequently. It is most efficient damage-wise to be as close as possible without endangering your fragile units too much. It is good to know that you can move the cannons closer to the target while they reload. For many ranged units, the reloading timer is not delayed by moving between shots. When enemies shoot at one of your units, they actually target a location straight in front of where that unit currently is because they assume that it is where the unit will be at the time of impact. In this example, one heavy spearman is micromanaged to run in a circular pattern to dodge dozens of arrows, which will otherwise kill them very fast. The goal here is to have the green archers waste their attacks while the red archers are dealing damage. This works with any unit that moves quickly enough in comparison to the speed of the projectile. Currently, when issuing a move or an attack move command to a group of units, they tend to arrange themselves in a rectangular formation perpendicular to the direction of the move. However, you could sometimes prefer your troops to align in a different direction at destination. You could then try to hold the Shift key to queue a second command following the first one. But as you can see in this example, that does not work well when the second move does not cover much distance. Another approach is to hold the right mouse button after clicking the ground and then drag toward the desired alignment before releasing. Unfortunately, I believe the pathing changes degraded the drag formation results. It is still a bit better than the other approach, but hopefully it will get fixed. Maybe you can control it better than me when you experiment with it. The button near the minimap is the formation spread toggle. The default is the close formation. The other option is the wide formation. After moving, your troops will arrange themselves with a lot of space between them when using the wide formation. This is very useful when facing enemy with area damage, such as cannons, springholes, catapults, mamluks, samurais, battle elephants, Eastern Europe halberdiers, trench mortars, bombers, or flammenwerfers, and many more. But spreading the troops is not always the best decision. This is because the extra space between your units can benefit enemy melee units with single target attacks. This can allow them to have several units attacking on a few of your frontline units, which will reduce your numbers very quickly. In real-time strategy games, the cumulative perimeter around your units that is exposed to enemy melee attacks is called the surface area. Excess room around your units makes them more vulnerable to a larger force of melee units. You might still lose the battle, but you can inflict more casualties by delaying the access of the second and third rows of enemies. The ideal situation is to fit your units between buildings or unpassable terrain to minimize the surface area. This way, a small force can resist a much larger army, like King Leonidas of Sparta in the movie 300. Of course, the odds of winning a battle are improving when using a unit composition that counters the one of your opponent. In war selection, there are only a few explicit modifiers by unit class. Therefore, the ideal counters are not always obvious and will also evolve according to future balance patches. They can also sometimes vary depending on the unlocked upgrades, the position, and the size of the armies. Anyway, here are a few examples for the latest version of the game. In the Stone Age, the natural counter to macemen is slingers, because the slow macemen have trouble connecting with faster kiting units. In open spaces with both players having a small or medium army size, warriors will typically beat slingers. However, that might not be the case for much larger groups, especially if slingers are in a tight area. Macemen will crush warriors in a static battle, although the warriors do have the mobility to easily move away from that fight and attack elsewhere. Finally, the bulwark is the ultimate counter to slinger, but they get destroyed by macemen. Once in Bronze Age, archers fill the same role as slingers, while spearmen are mostly similar to warriors. Horsemen typically do great against pure archers, but not great against spearmen considering their cost. In Iron Age, heavy spearmen beat normal spearmen and horsemen, but they currently lose against swordmen. Well-managed swordmen are efficient against pretty much anything, including towers and legionaries when considering their cost. Axemen have a strong but slow area damage attack, which can trade well in some situations, mostly against groups of more expensive medieval melee units. However, they're not cost-effective against spread archers. Iron Age Asia does not have as many unit options, but the heavy archers can counter almost anything in a direct fight, with perhaps a little help from some heavy spearmen acting as a front shield. A tower or two are useful when facing many Asian heavy archers. Rams are great against towers, while hen rams are the Asian counter to rams. There are many units combination possibilities in the medieval ages. At this point, it is useful to have some knowledge of armor and attack values. In war selection, an armor value is subtracted from the attack value to calculate the effective damage. For example, a Janissary has 35% probability to reduce damage taken by 8, 35% probability to reduce damage taken by 4, and 20% by 2. If a unit has a lot of high armor values, such as heavy knights, squads, or lanzknechts, you need a high attack value to deal meaningful damage. High attack value unit examples include gunpowder units, crossbows, cuirassiers, and springalds. There are other uncommon units with very high attacks such as Hussarias, Pernach, and Morgensterns, but those are currently expensive and typically not worth producing. Units such as pikemen, ashigarus, and azaps have a weak but quick attack which is optimal against low armor targets. They are also great to apply the slow effect on enemy mounted units, which then helps your high attack units to catch them. When a unit has multiple attacks, the armor of the defender will also apply multiple times to match each of those. This is why the CPAC with its quick but weak dual area attacks is only good against clumped very low armor enemies. Catapults, onagers, and cannons are great against enemy troops in a closed formation, but their low mobility can make them vulnerable to mounted units. They also die quite quickly to Industrial Revolution military balloons. Speaking of balloons, they are best countered by anti-aircraft cannons, anti-air cars, torpedo boats, and IR-2 submachine gunners. A large enough group of snipers or rangers can also do well. Otherwise, balloons continue to dominate the sky as they are beating fighters, aerostats, and bombers. Cavalryman is another popular Industrial Revolution unit often used against workers and any artillery. Machine gunners can counter them reasonably well when in small numbers, but machine gun towers and India's machine gun elephants do even better. To deal with any unit with a machine gun weapon, high armor is preferable, such as armored cars and tanks. Armored cars can be countered by tanks, howitzers, and medieval cannons. The best counter to tanks will be Britain's anti-tank rifles. Otherwise, grenade launchers and howitzers should be cost-effective. Bombers are a decent counter to heavy tanks and large ships, but I prefer to use them mostly against buildings. Torpedo boats and submarines are the best against the battleships.
You will naturally learn a lot of the counters with experience.
It is not necessary to know them all to win games, but feel welcome to ask about other units in the comments.
Never charge into a losing battle.
You should get some vision by upgrading a tower, researching the vision upgrades at your town hall, or otherwise scout to discover what your enemy is preparing. With game experience, you will develop a good sense of which of two opposing armies should win a fight. If your opponent is stronger, you can try to delay the engagement as much as possible, perhaps with skirmishes or with raids on his territory, and use this time to produce the most appropriate troops or defenses. It is also okay to sacrifice some territory and maybe an outpost if it allows you more time to prepare. This can enable you to then win the battle more decisively. Also consider that the war selection population cap mechanic is well designed to offer a window of opportunity where opponents plateau at similar population despite other differences in progress. This is why you often see experienced players in a leading position trying to force a battle as soon as they are reaching the population cap. They want to inflict critical damage to prevent an opponent with less progress from catching up later. Trading some soon-to-be outdated troops is also a way to replace them with fresher, stronger units. Hopefully you learned a few tricks in this video that will contribute to your future victories. Watching casted replays is also a fun way to learn more about war selection, and so I invite you to check the other videos I published on my YouTube channel. Have a great day. Goodbye.